I now believe that we have entered a different dimension where Philadelphia sports teams are actually good. 'Cause that's the only rational way to explain what happened this weekend. I mean, the Phillies came back from a 2-0 deficit to win 6-3 in the ninth inning. The Eagles won on a missed field goal. The Union won first in the East. Actually, that is pretty normal for them. We're going to break down all three of these teams here on this episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. Welcome back to Sports Talk Philadelphia. As always, I'm your host, and I'm joined by a full panel for the first time this season. First, we have Siobhan. Siobhan, how are you doing?
Well, as the resident Union fan on this show, I'm doing great. Thanks, Aiden.
Unfortunately, the Phillies fans here might be struggling a bit, but we do have Mike, who is also an Eagles fan. So, Mike, you're probably doing okay so far.
Oh, yeah, I'm doing good. We'll see. Ask me that tomorrow. We'll see if that changes.
100% agree. And then we have Shane, who is our residential Philly fan. So, Shane, you're probably a little bit less out of the three.
I mean, I'm still feeling good. We got a home game tomorrow, so 2 home games this weekend. So
yeah, the Phillies do have a home game this weekend. But first, we're going to jump back to what happened over the weekend. They played their wild card series against the St. Louis Cardinals. They looked very shaky in their first 8 innings against the Cardinals, not scoring any runs until the 9th inning, where they scored 6 runs in a 6-3 comeback win. They then won the second game in a 2-0 shutout gem pitched by Aaron Nola. So they won those 2 games. They then made it to the divisional round. But we're going to just talk about what happened this series, especially game 1. The fact they were down 2-0, won 6-3. Just an amazing comeback win for them.
Yeah, they don't call them the Titans for nothing. And it was the Cardinals, that was the first time in 94 playoff games where they've blown a lead of 2+ or more runs. And this year they were 74-3 after leading after 8 innings, which is just great. And the offense was doing nothing until that 9th inning. But I mean, I know Helsley wasn't really throwing strikes, and I don't know why Marmol didn't take him out. But hey, it worked out for the Phillies, and I mean that was just one of the better wins that I've seen the Phillies have in recent years.
yeah, I mean, at first it didn't look too good for the Phillies going into the 9th. You had Rhys Hoskins come up, he struck out, but then you had JT with the base hit, Harper walked, Bohm got hit with a ball in his elbow, and then you had Segura who came through, Kyle Schwarber with the sac fly. It was a good inning for the Phillies, and they pulled the win out.
Yeah, so when you look at the Phillies, the offense definitely struggled throughout the series except for the 9th inning. The one good thing for them, at least, is that they had a great outing by Zach Wheeler. And the bullpen also pitched really well, too. So before we go into starting pitching, the bullpen, how important is that going to be for the Phillies going forward through the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. I mean, Eflin, I think the closer situation is still a little shaky. I mean, I don't think they have now with the Robertson thing, which I'm sure we'll get into later. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they don't have a closer that they can really trust right now. I feel like. I mean, they tried with Sir Anthony, he was struggling, and then Eflin, he's got the saves, but it's just like almost giving me a heart attack each time he goes out there. But I mean, I think he's more of a long reliever role. I think it's either Alvarado or Sir Anthony that you have to put in that closer role, and I think that's what they should do in the rest of the series versus the Braves.
Yeah, I mean, in the Braves series, Dominguez looked really well. So I think you can. I mean, if he continues to pitch like that, I think you can move him back in the closer role. I mean, like what Mike pointed to, Eflin has been shaky in both the games against the Cardinals and against the Braves. So, but Alvarado has just been really good for the Phillies, coming through every time they bring him in the 8th inning. But they cannot use Connor Brogdon.
Yeah, no, there's been some guys that have been much better than others, to say the least. The other big concern with the Phillies, and this also goes in the Braves series, but this was a problem that started in the St. Louis series. The top 3 guys in your offense have just not produced at all. Kyle Schwarber and Rhys Hoskins combined 1 for 34. Bryce Harper, besides the 1 home run, also really struggled as well. So when you look at these guys, is there any sort of reason to hope that they can get it together?
I mean, I definitely think that you would hope that they're capable enough to get things together because they are the top 3 guys, but I don't know how much longer Schwarber can be in that leadoff spot if he keeps hitting like this, because he's just not doing what a leadoff guy needs to do. And in such a nervy series against the Braves, like, yes, it's going to be a home game and that helps a lot, but you know, when you're in a game 3 and you're kind of in the playoffs flying by the seat of your pants, you have to put all gears and go. And right now the top 3 guys aren't doing what they need to do, which puts pressure on the rest of the lineup, which kind of causes this really negative domino effect. So you want to hope that they can get it together, since it's really kind of do or die, but I don't know if they actually will, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying all year, I don't think Schwarber should be leading off, but you can't have him and Hoskins both at 1 and 2, especially right now with them 1 for 34 in these playoffs, and that's just, you just can't do that, especially against a Braves team. You know, I think they should probably move Bohm up, and if you're going to move one of the guys down, I would move Hoskins down, you know, because Schwarber, I'm not a fan of him leading off, but, you know, he's been there all year, and, you know, he does give that pop at the beginning of the lineup, but I don't think you can have him and Hoskins both at 1 and 2, especially with the way they're struggling. No way.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Schwarber is 0 for 16 with 8 strikeouts in the postseason so far, and then Rhys Hoskins is 1 for 18. Neither of them have looked really good. Schwarber, both of them have just keep swinging at pitches right down the middle of the plate and not making contact with them. But the one good thing is that Harper had that home run in the second game against the Cardinals, so hopefully that can get him going.
So as much as the offense show, the two guys have been very consistent for the Phillies have been their top two starting pitchers in Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. They're combined 2-1 in the postseason so far. They've only allowed 3 runs in a combined 19 innings. The unfortunate part is the Phillies have only been able to score 8 runs in the 3 outings by these starting pitchers, which is a big reason why the Phillies lost the one game and just haven't looked good. What is the key for these guys to keep doing what they've done so far?
I mean, you definitely just want to have it be, oh, this is playoff baseball, and this is what they need to be doing, because after Nola and Wheeler, the starting rotation drops off a lot, and so especially when they don't have run support for their 2 best ones, it's just kind of, it's a lot to ask for 2 guys to kind of support the whole game and just pitching, but they've been doing a good job of it so far, so you just got to hope that they can get enough rest and keep it up for as many more games as the Phillies appear in.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I think some people gave the Phillies a chance to beat the Cardinals were Nola and Wheeler, and that proved to be right. I mean, they single-handedly probably led them to this round in the division series, and like Siobhan said, after them two, I mean, we thought we could trust Ranger, but he just could not throw a strike in Game 1 against the Braves. So, you know, we'll see what they kind of do after Nola on Saturday in Game 4, kind of how they go. But, yeah, I mean, the only people you can really trust right now is Nola and Wheeler in that rotation.
Yeah, I mean, also if if both of them can locate their fastball, that, I mean, no one can hit that, and both of them throw a 97. Wheeler reaches 100 on it, so I mean that's the key thing that they got to keep doing with this. Also with Nola, I mean, we go back into September, like his September starts haven't been so good, but he has 2 October starts, and they're really important. And he went 13 2/3 innings pitched, 6 hits, 15 strikeouts, 1 walk, and no runs so far. So if he keeps that up, they have a good chance of making it far.
Yeah, no, he's going to be pitching Game 3 for the Phillies in a very key game against the Atlanta Braves. Right now, that series is tied 1-1 after the Phillies lost last night 3-0 against Atlanta. It's a very important series. It's going to be a home game Friday night. It's the first home game for the Phillies since the 2011 Game 5 where they lost to the Cardinals. What is the one key thing that the Phillies have to do in order to get back on track in this series?
They have to start hitting. I mean, you know, you can, with the pitching being in the state that it is, you have to just get the offense going, especially like we said with Schwarber, Hoskins, Bryce Harper, Real Muto, Stott, and Alec Boehm can only do so much. So everyone's bats need to start heating up, and they need to start giving that run support and just start, you know, consistently scoring and not just waiting until the last gasps of the game to start getting the hitting going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it starts with the top lineup, like you said, and you know, I know the defense hasn't been bad, but we'll talk about the Hoskins play last time. I mean, you just cannot make that play, and defense has been better. I mean, we've seen it with Boehm, who we've, you know, got on him for just his defense has been so bad, but these playoffs he's been great. But Hoskins just last night, that was just a play you have to get in front of, and probably every first baseman in the league will either knock that down. So they got to work on that. But yeah, you're right. It starts with the offense, especially with Schwarber and Hoskins, and Harper's been really good, and I hope he just continues same thing with JT. So, and hopefully Castellanos will kind of piggyback what he did in Game 1. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Harper, since he hit that home run in St. Louis, he actually has been hitting the ball lately. I mean, in Game 1 of the against the Braves, he went 3 for 4. Two of his base hits were opposite field. So when he starts doing that, that means he's getting on track, hitting the ball, and I mean with the bunt also. And then Castellanos, he went 4 for 5, I think he did, in the first game as well. So if he gets going, then this team is going to go far.
Right now it feels like there's some players that are playing really well. The whole team just has to be consistent in order for them to be successful. We're now going to go to a team that is firing on all cylinders right now in the Philadelphia Eagles. They won again on Sunday in a close game, 20-17 win over the Arizona Cardinals. Jalen Hurts really didn't look like himself this game. Still rushed for 2 touchdowns, but he was only 26 of 36 for 239 passing yards. Dallas Goedert, for the first time this season, really got in the game. 8 receptions for 95 yards. And Devontae Smith had another really nice game, 10 receptions for 87 yards. Neither of those guys had any receiving touchdowns, but they still were a big part of the Eagles' offensive success. What is your main takeaway from how Jalen Hurts played this game, especially because it's not up to the standard that he played earlier this season?
Yeah, good teams and good quarterbacks, they know even when they're struggling, they know how to win and bounce back, and we saw that last week, and that's exactly what he and just the whole team in general did this week. And it was not pretty, but he got it done, and he creates plays, and that's what you need with Jalen. And like you said, Goddard finally stepping up, and I think we've seen it, he can be probably a top 5 tight end in this league if he just stays consistent. So, I mean, like I said, that's what good teams do. Even when it's not going well, they find a way to win, and that's what they did on Sunday, even with a little bit of luck.
The other interesting thing about Goddard is the way that they use them for a lot of the receptions. It wasn't a lot of downfield passes, a lot of 1-yard screens they turned into big receptions. His yards after carry is absolutely ridiculous. Do you see the Eagles using that screen sort of thing that they've been doing with him as a big way to get him the ball, or do you think they'll start going downfield a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that's one of Goddard's specialties is just the screen behind the line of scrimmage and then just getting those yards after catch. And we kind of, with Zach Ertz for the past few years, that's the one thing he couldn't do is the yards after the catch. And that's the one thing Goddard does phenomenal. And the one thing with him is just the drops, but not many out of this game. But yeah, I think, like I said, if he can stay consistent, he can, I think, be a top 3 tight end in the league, but I think right now he's top 5, and if hopefully that Hurts just keeps going to him and gets those stats up for him.
It definitely feels almost sort of like how the Chiefs used Travis Kelce in those 1-yard screens.
Yeah, I mean, Kelce had 4 touchdowns and 27 yards on Sunday night. I mean, sometimes that's what you got to do. I mean, you don't have to have 200 yards a game. If you just do those small plays, just like we saw with the Chiefs, and if the Eagles can kind of copy that a little bit, I think they could do much more with Hurts and Goddard connection.
The other reason the Eagles were able to win this game is because their defense. There definitely wasn't as much pressure as there was in the Washington game. They only got 1 sack. Again, Hassan Reddick playing absolutely ridiculous, getting another sack. Gardner Johnson, 10 tackles, 1 interception. He's a brand new Eagle. So there's just a lot of guys that are actually picking off passes. Do you think that the scheme that Jonathan Gannon has sort of run, do you think he's like learning more about how to run defense compared to last year?
A little bit, but the run defense still has not been great. Last game, it just wasn't great, and we saw the whole year just not really been good. But I think, you got to give Gannon some props. He's been a lot better than we saw what he was doing last year. And, the defense just needs to get better in the run game. But I am liking what I'm seeing from the secondary. And like you mentioned, Gardner Johnson, I think he's probably will be the X factor of the pickups that Howie has made in the offseason. And I think he's only 24 years old, too. And I think just he will be the future at safety, even though he wasn't really a safety in New Orleans. But I think he's definitely the future for a long time for the Eagles.
It's the one reason that the Eagles struggled a lot defensively is because he just couldn't really stop Kyler Murray at all. It felt like that he got a lot of open space. Had he not slid too early on the 3rd down and spiked in a 4th, there's a really good chance that game would have gone into overtime. Are you concerned if the Eagles keep playing mobile quarterbacks like that, if they might not be as successful as they were at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, probably. There's only a certain amount of mobile quarterbacks in this league, but it has, the league kind of has shifted to more of a mobile, quarterback as we've seen the past few years, with Hurts and Murray and Mahomes. But yeah, I think, next week we'll see with Cooper Rush, not really too mobile. So we'll see how they fare compared to how they fare to guys like Murray. So I think you're right. I think the mobile quarterback does play a big role in that because it's harder. You got to scheme for not just in the air, but you have to scheme what the quarterback's going to do in the run game. So I think it's definitely harder to to plan for a mobile quarterback, but we'll see next week how they do against Rush, who's not really as mobile as we've seen other quarterbacks.
Yeah, this win was not only big for the Eagles for staying undefeated, it was also big in the NFC East standings because Dallas and the Giants are right behind the Eagles. Eagles are 5-0. Giants and Cowboys are both tied for second at 4-1. Cowboys are in the tiebreaker of the Giants because they beat them, and the Commanders are very far behind at 1-4 at this point. Out of the 2 teams that are 4-1 behind the Eagles, which are the Cowboys and Giants, which team concerns you the most playing against?
Probably right now, probably the Cowboys, but not because of their offense. Their defense has been just great, and Micah Parsons probably, if he keeps playing, is on his way to a Defensive Player of the Year award. I know it's only week 5, but yeah, their defense has been great. But you got to give some credit to the Giants too. I mean, they're 4-1. You know, it hasn't really been a fluke too. I mean, they play some good football, and Commanders you don't really have to worry about. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the Cowboys, but you got to give the Giants their props. I mean, they're 4-1. You know, so I think they've been a little bit of a surprise in this division for sure.
It's sort of like how we talked about with Kyler Murray being a mobile quarterback. Daniel Jones is also a very mobile quarterback, definitely the most mobile quarterback in the NFC East outside of Jalen Hurts. Do you think that the Eagles are already trying to game plan for Jones after what happened with Kyler Murray this past week?
Probably, but their focus right now is on Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. I mean, you can't really look much into the future, but yeah, I mean, you know, you're right that mobile quarterback has been an issue for their defense, but I mean, you just have to focus on this week and not really worry about the future. And if they just focus on this week and get into 6-0, then they can worry about, you know, the future schedule ahead.
Yeah, this week is going to be a huge one for the Eagles. They're playing their rival Dallas Cowboys, who are currently in second. If the Cowboys win this game, they will be tied for first with the Eagles, but they'll take first because of a tiebreaker. That game is going to be 8:20 on Sunday night. Huge Friday night game. They're playing against Cooper Rush, who is the backup for Dallas, although he is 5-0 in his 5 career starts. And last year, the Eagles were really disappointing against Dallas. 2 blowout losses, although the last one was Week 17 when the Eagles had already clinched the playoff spot, so all of their starters were basically rested by that point. But they definitely are going to want some revenge off of that game. Do you believe that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing you got to look at with Dallas and their schedule, I mean, they have not played really a mobile quarterback besides Daniel Jones. You look at all the quarterbacks that played, Stafford, Brady, they're not mobile quarterbacks. I mean, they're pocket QBs, and Jalen Hurts would definitely be the toughest task in regards of a mobile quarterback, and we've seen what he can do in the pass game as well. So this would definitely be their toughest challenge to date. So we'll see what happens. I think their defense is good, but they've played some good defenses this year, and I think they can hold their ground.
Do you think that they can still hold their ground if Mailata doesn't play this game, considering how poorly Driscoll played in the last game against Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole line kind of got banged up, and I think they're mostly getting healthy, but I think Mailata is the one guy that might be out. Yeah, I mean, obviously, he's turned into one of the best left tackles in the league, and, you know, we've been lucky that we went from Jason Peters, who's now on the Cowboys, and the comment he made, I won't get into that, but to Mailata, and he's just been great, you know, never playing football, just being a rugby player. But, yeah, that's a big loss, and, you know, hopefully they can, with Hurts' mobility, that, you know, takes away a little bit of that so he can escape. But you don't want – Jalen's been getting hit way too much, and you don't want that to happen, especially against the Cowboys defense with Parsons.
You know, that defense is definitely scary. Do you have any predictions for this game?
I think they're going to win. I don't know. The score, I don't know, but I think they will win. I think it'll be closer than a lot of people are thinking, but Cooper Rush is still Cooper Rush. I know he's undefeated, but we'll see how they go. And the Cowboys' offense isn't really too scary, but we'll see what happens.
You know, this will definitely be a game that it's going to be interesting for the Eagles just because it is a division rival on prime time. It's a lot more pressure than some of the other games outside the Minnesota one. We're now going to jump into another team that has been very, very successful in the city of Philadelphia. That is the Philadelphia Union, who currently took the first place in the East. They unfortunately didn't win the Supporters Shield. LAFC won that by 2 games. But the Union, like I said, they got the first seed after beating Toronto 4-0 on Sunday, finished with 67 points. They are now going to play the winner of the Red Bulls FC Cincinnati game. Because they got the first seed, they clinched that bye, which is really big for them. So now I'm going to go with Siobhan. What is the biggest takeaway from that game on Sunday?
Definitely that Daniel Gazdag is a top candidate for MVP. I don't think he's going to get it because Hani Mukhtar of Nashville FC is slightly edges him out in terms of goals and assists, but you know, playing-wise, Daniel Gazdag has been incredibly important in that midfield. He's been incredibly important to not only score goals himself, especially penalty goals, but to support Julian Carranza, Michael Ure. You know, it's amazing that he's been able to step up so much and have a really historic scoring season. He has 22 goals in the regular season, which is the most that any single player has scored for the Union in their history. So I think the big takeaway from Toronto and the season overall is that Gazdag is, you know, he's the guy with a hat trick and an assist in a 4-0 game. I mean, he's just been absolutely insane.
So the biggest thing for the Union last year is that they fell just short of making it to the MLS championship. They lost to NYCFC in the conference final. Very unfortunate loss for them. How do you see them bouncing back in this year's playoffs?
The only reason that the Union do not have an MLS Cup banner in Subaru Park is because they got hit really badly with COVID. I fully believe, and I think any reasonable MLS fan would agree, if the Union had a full team, NYCFC would have been blown out of the water. So I think as long as people can stay healthy and as long as people can keep the red cards and yellow cards to a minimum, there is not anyone that can beat the Union when they're at their best, and they've been at their best all season. They haven't, knock wood, haven't had many injury problems. The discipline's a different issue, but again, as long as they can keep the injuries and the cards to a minimum, then the cup is theirs to lose this season.
One guy you mentioned a lot was Daniel Garza. He was awesome this entire season, scored 22 goals for the Union. He had 10 assists as well on the year. Just an awesome season. 7-7 on penalty kicks too, which is just really amazing, and a hat trick in the final game. As we mentioned, he is someone that the Union brought in early last year, so he didn't really have time to gel with the team before they made it to the playoffs, besides the one season. So now that he's had 2 seasons under the belt with the team, do you think that's going to help a lot going into the playoffs?
Absolutely, because in the 5 big season end stats, there's a Union player in every single one. For total goals and assists, Gazdag has 32. For goals, Gazdag has 22. For assists, Kai Wagner has 15. For goals per 90 minutes, Ure has .717, and for clean sheets, Blake has 15. So this team as a whole is just really gelling together, doing what they need to do. But, you know, Gazdag is the guy that you kind of want to build the team around because he can do defensive work, he can do forward work, he can, you know, be unselfish and give those assists too. So he's going to be an incredibly important player in the playoffs, and he's going to be the player that I think anyone that plays the Union is really going to have to be afraid of.
So the one thing in the city we never like to do is look too far ahead for any of the teams. But I do want to look at LAFC, who won the West. They pair up pretty well with the Union in the East. Who do you feel like would have an edge if they do end up playing each other in the championship?
I think it's likely it's going to be a Union LAFC matchup, and you know, LAFC is a great team. They have Gareth Bale, they have a lot of big names, but again, the Union are just a really strong, they can be a scrappy side when they need to be, and LAFC plays in a very LA polished, clean kind of way. So when you face up against someone like the Union, I don't think they'll be able to run with them the whole 90 minutes, and I really do believe that the Union could take the cup.
So 3 very good teams in the state of Philadelphia. Definitely a fun time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. We're now going to go into our last segment, Fast Five. We're going to start with our first topic, talking baseball with Mike.
All right, so one of the best times of the year is October, and that means MLB playoffs. So we'll start with, in the NL, we know with the Phillies, so I won't go too much into that, but in the other series, you got the Dodgers and the Padres. That's tied 1-1 right now. Obviously, the Dodgers are the favorite in that series, and I think they'll probably win that series, but San Diego played great last night. Manny Machado returning to LA with a home run. So we'll see how that plays out. I still think the Dodgers will win that series, but we'll see how that goes. And then in the AL, you got the New York and the Guardians, which is 1-0 New York. New York favored to win that series, and like I said, I think Cleveland's offense just is not good enough to beat the Yankees or keep up with their offense. And then last but not least, the Astros and the Mariners, who in that game won Jordan Alvarez with one of the probably best home runs in the playoffs that I've seen in a while. Awesome, coming back from down 2-0. I want the Mariners to win that series. I think a lot of America wants them to win that series. But we'll see how that plays out. But Astros are obviously favored in that series for sure.
And a lot of great series for this postseason. A lot of fun to watch postseason baseball this October. We're now going to go with Talking Soccer with Siobhan.
So I want to throw it over to England, where with Arsenal FC, I want the praise to be as loud as the disrespect was, because they are sitting at the top of the table. They beat Liverpool, and you know they beat them well because Jurgen Klopp was complaining about the reffing. So I just really think that people need to start taking Arsenal seriously, and I'm not just saying that because I'm an Arsenal fan. They have some of the best players in the league, especially the best young players. Mikel Arteta is proving that his process had every right to be trusted, and I know it's very early in the Premier League season, but again, people need to start giving Arsenal their flowers, taking them seriously. I will not be surprised if they win the league. I will not be surprised if they win FA Cup and Europa League and qualify for the Champions League as well. So if you're going to have Arsenal's name in your mouth, it better be praiseworthy, because they are just setting the league on fire, and I just really need the recognition for that because we've waited a long time for that.
We're now going to go back to American football, where on Sunday after the Commanders' 21-17 loss to Tennessee, Coach Ron Rivera was asked about the biggest weakness on the team compared to the other NFC East teams. His response, one word, quarterback. The quarterback, of course, is former Eagles quarterback Carson Wentz. So, Mike, I want to go with you. What was your thoughts on that response?
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, there's a reason why that he's not on the Eagles anymore, and there's a reason why the Colts gave up on him that quickly. I mean, it's a shame because he was, if you go back to 2017, I would never imagine that he would go down this low. I mean, it's a shame what that injury did to him, but yeah, he's just not the same quarterback, and I don't know how much longer. I know we were all talking about the return to Philly in a few weeks, but I don't think he's even going to be the starting quarterback for Washington at that point. So it's a shame that he's gone down this far, but yeah, Rivera, I know he's had his problems, but he's not wrong with that statement at all.
3 teams in 3 years for Wentz. Definitely some questions about the rest of his career going forward. We're now going to go with hockey preview with Shane. NHL just started their season. So, Shane, what were your biggest takeaways from the earliest games?
The Colorado Avalanche look really good, and I think they're going to repeat as Stanley Cup champions because, I mean, they did get rid of some key players on their championship team, but they still have Nathan McKinnon, they have Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, and on the back end they have Cal McCarr, who is probably the best defenseman in the league right now, and as well as Devon Taves. He's such an underrated defenseman, but I do think that the Edmonton Oilers will be giving them a run for their money if they can get defense and goaltending because they have the best player in the world, and also Leon Draisaitl is such an underrated player for them as well.
So the end Fast Five, we're going to be talking about a 5th different sport. I am a huge rugby fan, and the Women's World Rugby Cup just started last week in New Zealand, and there were some pretty huge games. First of all, the English women's rugby team got off to a bit slow start against Fiji and just blew them out of the water. Ended up winning 84-19 in the biggest margin of victory in the Women's World Cup history. Very notable game there. The other teams that I really liked, the United States, definitely struggled a lot. They lost to Italy 22-10. And Canada's women team won 41-5 over Japan. The reason that team's a little bit notable is because the Canadian men's team has made it to every single World Cup previous to this year, where they will not be playing in 2023 after not winning the Americas qualifier. So Canadian rugby fans are really only watching the women's team so far until the next World Cup cycle. And it's good to see that their women's team is off to a strong start. The Red Roses for England has just been awesome so far. They have the really great undefeated streak going. It's going to be very hard to beat them. Them and New Zealand are probably the 2 teams that are going to be fair to playing each other in the championships. And the United States is just going to have to play a lot better than they did in their first game. That wraps it up for Sports Talk Philadelphia. Thank you so much for tuning in. Follow us on our social media pages on Instagram and Twitter at SportsTalk LTV. We hope that you enjoyed watching this episode, and make sure to turn in next week as well. Thank you so much for watching.